Olivia and Alex met in college, two dreamers orbiting in the same small world of ambition and caffeine. Alex studied architecture, obsessed with lines and light, while Olivia majored in communications, fascinated by the power of words and how stories could shift the mood of an entire day. Their connection was instant, the kind of quiet understanding that needed no grand gestures. After graduation, they moved into a small apartment near the park. The space was modest. Uneven floors, sunlight that slanted perfectly across the kitchen table, and a single shelf stacked with both architecture books and Olivia's growing collection of novels. Alex worked late into the night on blueprints, tracing invisible futures with his pencil, while Olivia filled the air with music and coffee and words. Life felt like a slow dance, graceful and predictable. But predictability has a way of turning into stillness. As the years slipped by, Alex's career accelerated. His projects grew bigger, his hours longer, his presence thinner. Olivia, now working at a marketing agency, found herself trapped in a cycle of meetings, metrics, and muted dreams. Her job was fine, stable, respectable, but her heart was beginning to quiet. Every morning she stared into the mirror and saw not the woman she dreamed of becoming, but someone surviving out of habit. At first, the change was subtle. The silence during dinner, the way conversations shortened to one-word replies. "Everything okay?" she'd ask. "Yeah," Alex would say, smiling, already half in thought about his next project. There was no argument, no betrayal, just distance. A kind of emotional erosion that came not from storms but from too many calm, unexamined days. One afternoon, while cleaning, Olivia found an old film camera, her father's. Dust clung to its surface, but when she looked through the viewfinder, the world sharpened. She walked outside and pointed the lens at the park across the street. The moment she pressed the shutter, a small spark flickered inside her. The photo wasn't perfect, but it was honest. That night, Alex came home late again. He talked about a new design competition, about deadlines and opportunity. Olivia listened, nodded, and thought about the photo waiting undeveloped on the camera roll. When he kissed her goodnight and drifted to sleep, she stayed awake, scrolling through photography workshops online. At 2 a.m, she signed up for one. The decision was small, almost invisible in the quiet apartment. But to Olivia, it felt like oxygen rushing into a long-closed room. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, she brewed her coffee and looked out the window. The city was awake, pulsing, alive. And for the first time in a long while, she felt awake too. The familiar hum of traffic, the laughter of strangers, the rhythm of life. It all seemed to whisper the same thing. You're still here. You can still begin. Olivia didn't know where the workshop would lead. She didn't plan to quit her job or fix her relationship overnight. All she knew was that something in her had stirred, a quiet but undeniable longing to see again, really see. That night before bed, she placed the camera on her nightstand. The lens caught a glint of lamplight, a small reflection of something hopeful. She touched the cool metal and smiled. Maybe the next photo would be better. Maybe she would be too. The photography workshop met in a small, sunlit studio tucked behind a row of cafes and bookstores. The walls were lined with prints of city streets. Faces caught mid-laughter, reflections in puddles, strangers frozen in fleeting moments of beauty. Olivia fell out of place at first, clutching her old camera, while everyone else carried sleek, modern gear. But when the instructor, Min, smiled and said, "A camera only listens to the person holding it," she exhaled. Min was quiet, deliberate, and patient. He spoke less about technique and more about presence. "Don't chase the perfect shot," he told the group. "Walk slower. Notice what most people miss." Those words landed deep. Olivia began to see differently. She noticed a woman on the train staring out the window, her hand resting on an unread book. The way light spilled across the pavement after rain. The reflection of neon signs in a puddle by the curb. She lifted her camera, hesitated, then clicked. The sound was soft, but echoed somewhere inside her, a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. After class, Min approached her. "You have a good eye," he said simply. "You see emotion, not just image." Olivia smiled, unsure how to respond. For so long she had been praised for her efficiency, her organization, never for her way of seeing. That evening, Alex returned home late, shoulders heavy from another 12-hour day. His suit jacket hung from one arm, his phone buzzing with unread messages. Olivia made him tea and told him about the workshop, about Min's advice, about the photos she'd taken of the city's small wonders. He smiled, half-tired. "That's great, Liv," he said, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead before opening his laptop. She watched him as he worked, the light from the screen painting his face in shades of blue. Once, that focus had inspired her. Now it made her ache. She wondered when their worlds had stopped overlapping and started running parallel. Still, she didn't blame him. Alex was chasing his dream, the same way she once had. She just wasn't sure she still remembered what her dream looked like. In the days that followed, Olivia carried her camera everywhere. During lunch breaks, she wandered the city, framing strangers' shadows and stories. Her co-workers teased her affectionately, "Our in-house artist." But she didn't mind. There was a quiet thrill in seeing the ordinary through a lens. It felt like discovering secret doorways in a world she thought she knew by heart. One afternoon, Min gave the class an assignment: capture distance using 5 photos. The word struck Olivia. She thought Alex, of the way they still shared a home, but rarely shared silence anymore, only background noise. That weekend, she took her 5 shots. An empty chair across from hers at their kitchen table. 2 shadows on the wall, almost touching but not quite. Her hand resting on Alex's, blurred by movement. A lunchbox with a note inside: "Don't forget to eat." Her own reflection in an elevator mirror, faint, almost transparent. When she showed the photos to Min, he studied them quietly and said, "You're not afraid to look." That night, Olivia thought about those words long after Alex fell asleep. She wasn't sure when she had stopped looking, at the world, at herself, at them, but she knew she didn't want to stop again. So she made a quiet promise to herself, to keep seeing, to walk slower, breathe deeper, and pay attention to the moments that used to slip past unnoticed. The next morning, as she stood by the window with her coffee, camera slung around her neck, the city stretched before her like an open page. She lifted the lens and whispered to herself, "Let's begin again." The weeks that followed unfolded like a slow awakening. Olivia's life hadn't changed on the surface. She still went to work, met deadlines, cooked dinner, shared quiet evenings with Alex. But inside, something was shifting. The world felt larger. Somehow, each morning, the walk to the office became a small adventure. She noticed how the light pooled at street corners, how strangers' laughter echoed against tall glass buildings, how time seemed to pause whenever she lifted her camera. Photography became her private ritual. It wasn't about creating art or chasing perfection. It was about breathing, about remembering she existed beyond to-do lists and expectations. Alex noticed the difference. "You seem lighter," he said one night as they stood on the balcony. The city buzzed below, tiny windows flickering like stars. "Maybe I am," she replied with a smile. He pulled her close, kissed her hair, and for a moment it felt like old times, effortless, tender, whole. But love, she realized, doesn't always vanish with anger. Sometimes it fades quietly, replaced by comfort and routine. And comfort, if left unattended, can turn into distance. Alex's schedule tightened even more as his firm prepared for an international competition. He was excited, consumed, and Olivia tried to share in his enthusiasm. But she also felt invisible in the glow of his ambition. Their conversations became shorter, their silences longer. He wasn't cruel, just absent in the way people become when they're lost inside their own goals. One Saturday morning, Olivia suggested they take a trip, just a day out of the city, a break from the endless projects and phone calls. Alex hesitated. After the deadline, he promised, eyes already drifting back to his notes. She nodded, pretending it didn't sting. That afternoon, she went out alone with her camera. She wandered until she found herself in a part of the city she didn't recognize. Narrow streets, peeling walls, children chasing a soccer ball through the dust. She lifted her lens and captured moments that pulsed with life. A man fixing his bicycle, an old woman selling flowers, a little girl spinning barefoot in the rain. Every click reminded her that beauty still existed, even when life felt uncertain. As she reviewed the photos later, something inside her softened. She realized she wasn't angry with Alex. She was angry with herself. For shrinking, for waiting, for letting her own life orbit around his. She had spent so long trying to hold on that she'd forgotten she could stand on her own. That night, she didn't bring up the trip again. Instead, she shared her photos with men who studied them carefully. "These are alive," he said. "You're not just seeing anymore, you're feeling." The next day, Olivia walked into work and asked her manager if she could lead a small storytelling campaign, combining words and photos to capture the spirit of the city. To her surprise, he agreed. The project was small, but it felt significant, like reclaiming a part of herself that had been waiting quietly for years. When she told Alex that evening, he smiled distractedly. "That's amazing, Liv," he said, scrolling through his phone. But Olivia didn't need his validation anymore. The joy came from within, from knowing she had taken the first real step towards something new. Before bed, she opened the window and looked out at the glowing skyline. Somewhere out there, Alex was building towers of glass and steel, symbols of permanence. She, meanwhile, was learning to find meaning in things that didn't last. A passing shadow, a flicker of light, a captured breath of time. Both were building, just in different ways. As the night deepened, Olivia whispered to herself, "Maybe love isn't about holding on. Maybe it's about allowing space for him to grow and for me to find my own wings." And for the first time in a long while, she felt free. By late autumn, the air had turned crisp, and the trees lining the streets of the city blazed with color. Olivia's days moved between work, photography, and quiet evenings that she often spent alone. The small project she'd pitched, the storytelling campaign, had taken off. Her photos were now part of a digital exhibit on the agency's website, each paired with a short narrative she wrote herself. It was the first time in years that her name had appeared beside something that felt like her. One Saturday, she wandered into a little bookstore near the river. It was one of those places where time seemed to slow, the smell of paper and dust, the soft of an old ceiling fan, the faint jazz playing in the background. She was flipping through a photography book when someone beside her spoke. "Beautiful shots, aren't they?" She turned to see a man about her age, maybe a few years older. He wore a camera slung casually across his chest and smiled with an easy confidence. His name was Daniel, a freelance photojournalist who had just returned from an assignment abroad. They started talking, first about the book, then about lenses, light, and the stories behind images. Conversation flowed effortlessly, the way it does when two people speak the same unspoken language. For the first time in a long while, Olivia felt seen, not as Alex's partner, not as the efficient employee, but as herself. They met again the following week for coffee, then again to visit a local photography exhibit. Daniel talked about his travels, the people he'd met, the moments that changed him. He spoke with passion, but without pretense. "The camera doesn't just capture what's there," he said once. "It teaches you how to pay attention, to others, to yourself." That night, Olivia lay awake, his words replaying in her mind. She wasn't falling for him. Not yet, maybe not all, but he represented something she'd lost. Curiosity, openness, the courage to live beyond routine. Alex noticed a shift. "You've been out a lot lately," he said one evening. His tone wasn't accusing, just uncertain. "Just taking photos," she replied softly. "With someone." Olivia paused. "A photographer I met. We talk about work. That's all." Alex nodded, but didn't press further. For a moment, she wished he would. Not because she wanted to fight, but because she wanted proof that he still felt something. But instead, he turned back to his laptop, and the silence between them stretched like a canyon. In the weeks that followed, Olivia kept seeing Daniel, not as an escape, but as a mirror. Their conversations reminded her of the person she used to be, passionate, daring, unafraid to start over. They never crossed any boundaries, though sometimes their eyes lingered a moment too long. It wasn't romance she sought. It was reflection. One afternoon, Daniel showed her his latest project. Portraits of street musicians paired with short essays about their lives. "Every photo has a voice," he said. "The trick is learning to listen." That night, Olivia sat at her desk, scrolling through her own photos. The city scenes, the strangers, the quiet moments, they all had stories she'd never told. She opened a blank document and began to write. Words poured out of her like rain. Stories of the people she'd photographed, yes, but also stories of herself. The woman who once got a dream, who found light again through a lens, who was learning to stand alone without feeling lonely. When she finally stopped typing, the clock read 2 a.m. Her chest felt both heavy and light, heavy with truth, light with release. The next morning, she emailed the draft to Min, asking for his feedback. He replied a few hours later, "This isn't just about photography, Olivia. This is about becoming. Keep going." She looked out the window, where sunlight spilled over the rooftops, and whispered, "I will." Winter settled over the city, with a quiet kind of melancholy. The days grew shorter, and the light, that beautiful golden light Olivia used to chase with her camera, became rare and fleeting. Yet even in the cold, she found warmth in her new rhythm. Mornings filled with work, evenings spent writing, weekends wandering through alleys and art exhibits, camera in hand. Her stories, the ones she'd begun to write late at night, had started gaining attention online. Men encouraged her to share them publicly, and after much hesitation, she created a small blog, Through Her Lens. It wasn't meant to be anything grand, just a space for her thoughts and photographs. But within weeks, comments began to appear. Messages from strangers who said her work made them feel seen. That realization that her quiet reflections could touch someone else's world made her heart swell. But while her world expanded, the distance at home deepened. Alex was now fully absorbed in his architectural project. Long nights, business dinners, and a constant hum of exhaustion. When he was home, he was polite, kind even but distracted. Their conversations had thinned to logistics, groceries, bills, schedules. Love had become maintenance. One evening, Olivia cooked his favorite meal. She lit candles, played their old playlist, hoping to recapture something. When Alex arrived, he looked pleasantly surprised, kissed her cheek, and said, "You didn't have to go through all this." "I wanted to," she said softly. Dinner started warm, but faded quickly. His phone buzzed twice. Each time, he muttered an apology and checked it. By dessert, Olivia had gone silent. When he finally noticed, he put the phone down. "Liv, what's wrong?" She took a deep breath. "We're fine, Alex. But I don't know if we're alive anymore." He frowned. You're saying that because I'm busy? This is just a phase. No, she interrupted gently. It's not just about time. It's about presence. You're here, but you're not with me. And I don't think you even realize how far we've drifted. He looked away, rubbing his temples. I'm doing this for us. For our future. I know, she said, but I don't want a future that forgets how to feel. Silence filled the room, not angry, just heavy, the kind that says more than words can. That night, Alex fell asleep on the couch, laptop open beside him. Olivia stood by the window, watching snow fall under the streetlight. Each flake shimmered before disappearing. 1,000 small moments, beautiful and gone. She picked up her camera, opened the balcony door, and stepped into the cold. The air bit at her cheeks, but she didn't mind. She raised the lens and snapped a photo. The soft glow of the lamp, the snow in motion, the reflection of her own silhouette in the glass. When she looked at the image later, she realized it said everything she couldn't. Beauty and solitude intertwined. The next morning, she woke early and left Alex a note on the counter. Taking a few days for myself. I need to think. Don't worry. She packed a small bag, her camera, and a notebook, and took the first train to the coast. As the city disappeared behind her, she stared out the window, unsure what she was running toward or from. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid of not knowing. She arrived at a quiet seaside town, a place she'd visited once as a child. The air smelled of salt and possibility. She walked until she reached the shoreline, the waves rushing and retreating like deep breaths. Standing there, Olivia lifted her camera and took another photo of the horizon, of freedom, of herself beginning again. The wind carried her hair across her face, and she laughed softly. The sound felt strange, unfamiliar, but good. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of her. The sea greeted Olivia with a vast, wordless welcome, a soft gray horizon stretching endlessly into color. She rented a small cottage near the shore, a simple place with creaking floors and salt-stained windows. The first morning, she woke to the rhythmic sound of waves and realized how long it had been since she'd heard true silence. Not the kind filled with absence, but the kind that listens back. She made no plans, no deadlines, no schedules. Just slow days filled with long walks, coffee by the window, and her camera always hanging from her neck. The coastal town was small, fishermen mending nets, children racing their bicycles along the pier, shopkeepers greeting her with gentle smiles. For the first few days, she didn't talk much. She just watched. At first, she thought the stillness would be unbearable. But as time passed, she began to feel something unexpected. Peace. It didn't arrive all at once. It crept in softly, like the tide returning after a long withdrawal. Every evening, she sat by the rocks and took photos of the sea. It never looked the same twice. Sometimes wild and crashing, other times still and silver. She realized the water mirrored her own heart, restless, searching, but always returning to center. One afternoon, she wandered into a small art gallery tucked behind a bakery. Inside, a collection of photographs captured the daily life of the town. Portraits of fishermen, waves, empty boats. The owner, an elderly woman named Clara, approached her with a knowing smile. "You have a photographer's eyes," she said. "The kind that sees stories before they're told." Olivia laughed. "I'm still learning." "Aren't we all?" Clara said. Then, after a pause, "Bring me some of your photos tomorrow. I'd love to see what the sea looks like through your eyes." That night, Olivia scrolled through the images she'd taken. Each one felt like a piece of her inner landscape. The curve of a broken shell, the softness of a wave meeting shore, the way sunlight flickered on the water like tiny moments of hope. She printed a few of them, unsure if they were good enough, but trusting that they were honest. The next day, she showed them to Clara, who looked at each one in silence. When she finished, she said simply, "These are not pictures. They're truth. Would you like to display them here next month? We're hosting a small community exhibit." Olivia blinked, caught between disbelief and gratitude. "Me? I've never—" "Good," Clara interrupted gently. "Then it will be real." That evening, Olivia walked along the shore, wind whipping through her hair. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, a quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Later, she sat at a cafe by the pier, sipping tea and writing in her notebook. Her thoughts drifted to Alex. She hadn't called him since leaving, though he'd sent a few messages, short, worried, polite. She cared for him still deeply, but something inside had shifted. For years, she defined herself through their togetherness. Now she was learning to define herself through wholeness. She wrote in her notebook, "Love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means letting go, so both hearts can breathe again." The next morning, she called Alex. Her voice trembled, but her heart was steady. "I'm okay," she told him. "I just need some time. Maybe we both do." He was quiet for a long moment. "I understand," he said finally. "I just want you to be happy, Liv." "I will be," she said softly. "I'm learning how." After the call, Olivia walked back to the beach. The tide was low, revealing smooth stones and forgotten shells. She crouched down, touched the cool sand, and smiled. The sea whispered its timeless rhythm, retreating, returning, beginning again. For the first time, she felt no rush to move forward. Healing, she realized, wasn't about chasing sunlight. It was about learning to rest in the gray. And in that stillness, in that quiet meeting between the waves and the shore, she began to rediscover herself. When spring came, the sea began to shimmer differently, softer, brighter, as though it were whispering that it was time to go. Olivia stayed one last night in the cottage, the air filled with salt and the slow ticking of the old wall clock. She packed her camera, her notebooks, and a single-framed photo, the horizon she had captured on her first day there. It wasn't perfect, but it held everything: confusion, courage, and the first spark of peace. On the morning she left, Clara met her at the gallery. Olivia's photographs now hung neatly among others: fishermen, waves, children, clouds. Her images of the shoreline were simple, yet people stopped to stare. They said the photos made them feel calm. "You see," Clara told her, "art doesn't ask for permission. It just tells the truth." Olivia smiled, the words settling gently in her chest. "Thank you," she said. The train ride back to the city was long, but it didn't feel heavy. She looked out at the passing fields and thought about how distance changes perspective, not just in photography, but in life. She didn't know exactly what waited for her, but she knew she wasn't the same woman who had left. When she reached the apartment, it was quiet. Alex had left a note on the table. "Welcome home. Let's talk when you're ready." She exhaled, tension loosening from her shoulders. That evening, when Alex came back, they sat across from each other, not as strangers, not quite as lovers, but as two people who had walked through silence and were finally ready to speak. "I missed you," he said. "I missed us," Olivia replied. "But I also needed to remember who I was without us." Alex nodded. "I know. I think I forgot who I was too." They talked for hours, honestly, gently, without blame. They both admitted to the quiet loneliness that had settled between them long before she left. They spoke not about rebuilding what was lost, but about understanding what still remained. "I don't want to go back to how things were," Olivia said finally. "I want to move forward, whatever that looks like." He reached across the table, his hand finding hers. Then let's move forward. Even if that means separately. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't from sadness alone. They were from clarity, the kind that hurts and heals at the same time. She squeezed his hand. Maybe that's what love means now. Not holding tighter, but letting each other breathe. They shared one last quiet dinner. No promises, no dramatic endings, just gratitude. When Alex left for a few days to stay with a friend, Olivia walked through the apartment slowly, touching the walls, the photos, the traces of shared life. It no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a chapter, one she had read, learned from, and could finally close with peace. In the weeks that followed, she poured herself into her photography. Her blog grew, her writing deepened, and men introduced her to a collective of local artists who invited her to collaborate on a city exhibit. She said yes. The first night she displayed her work, the gallery was full of people, some strangers, some familiar faces. As she stood by her photographs, she felt the softness of conversation around her. One image in particular drew attention, a photo of a sea meeting the shore, titled The Return. Daniel was there too, supportive, smiling. "You did it," he said. Olivia smiled back. "No," she replied. "I found it." After the event, she walked home alone through the warm spring night. The city lights glowed like constellations, and she no longer felt small beneath them. For the first time, the city wasn't a backdrop to her life. It was part of her story. When she reached her building, she paused before going in and looked up at the sky. The same stars that had watched her by the sea now shimmered above the city. She whispered to herself, "I'm home." And for the first time, she truly was. A year later, Olivia's apartment looked nothing like the one she and Alex once shared. The walls were lined with photographs. Her photographs, from the coast, from the city, from places she'd wandered through on her own. The air smelled faintly of coffee and eucalyptus, her favorite candle burning beside a stack of printed manuscripts. It was late afternoon, and sunlight spilled across her desk, painting everything gold. Her life wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. After the exhibit, opportunities had started to unfold slowly, naturally. A magazine published one of her photo essays. A local nonprofit invited her to teach creative storytelling workshops to underprivileged teens. Her blog, through her lens, had grown into a small but passionate community. She was no longer chasing success. She was cultivating meaning. Olivia often thought back to the woman she used to be, anxious, uncertain, afraid of disappointing others. She didn't resent her. She understood her. That version of herself had needed to lose her footing to learn how to stand alone. Some evenings, she still thought of Alex. Not with longing, but with gratitude. They had met once since their separation. A quiet lunch at a cafe near his office. He looked happy, lighter too. They spoke of their new projects, their mutual respect evident in every word. When they said goodbye, there were no promises to rekindle anything, no tears, just a knowing smile between two people who had loved, grown, and learned to let go. Now, as Olivia prepared for another photography exhibit, her first solo one, she felt a mix of nerves and calm. The collection was titled Becoming. Every photograph told a piece of her story. The first shot from park, the stormy sea, the reflection of her own hand reaching toward light. That evening, she met Min and Daniel at the gallery to finalize the display. Daniel, who had become a close friend, walked through the space with her. "It's strange," he said, pausing in front of one image. "The shoreline at dusk. Your photos used to search for something. Now they know." Olivia smiled softly. "Maybe because I do too." The opening night was intimate but full. People drifted through the room, stopping at her photos, reading her captions, leaving quiet comments in the guest book. Olivia stood by the doorway, a glass of wine in hand, watching it all unfold. She didn't feel like she was performing anymore. She was simply sharing. Near the end of the evening, a young woman approached her, shy, maybe 22. "Your work," she said, voice trembling a little. "It feels honest. Like it's okay not to have everything figured out yet." Olivia smiled, warmth rising in her chest. "You don't have to," she said gently. "Sometimes not knowing is where the magic begins." When the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, Olivia stepped outside. The night air was cool, the city humming softly beneath a sky full of stars. She walked slowly, heels clicking against the pavement, her camera swinging lightly at her side. Every breath felt new. She passed by the park where she'd once taken her very first photo, the day she'd realized she was lost and needed to find her way back. The trees were fuller now, the air alive with laughter and movement. She stopped, lifted her camera, and took one more picture. The shutter clicked, a single, clean sound that echoed gently into the night. She looked at the image on the screen. A couple sitting on a bench, the woman leaning into the man's shoulder, their faces turned toward the light. It was simple, fleeting, imperfect, and beautiful. Olivia lowered the camera, smiling. She knew now that life wasn't about capturing perfection. It was about noticing the moments that felt true, about starting again as many times as it took, about creating a story not from what you've lost, but from what you found. As she turned toward home, the wind brushed her hair, carrying the scent of jasmine and possibility. For the first time, she didn't feel like a woman searching for herself. She simply was. And that was enough.